Large predators capture our imagination, representing wide landscapes and nature. They fulfill crucial roles in ecosystems by top-down control of herbivores and smaller predators, and in some cases introduced species. However, many apex predators are also of great conservation concern, with many threatened by extinction due largely to habitat destruction and direct persecution. We speak with Professor Dr. Euan Ritchie from Deakin University in Melbourne about the ecological roles of apex predators in ecosystems, as well as their conservation. Euan is a leading wildlife ecologist focusing on the ecology and conservation of biodiversity, particularly Australia's native mammals. He uses his research and extensive science communication to inform effective conservation policies and biodiversity management, as well as promoting a broader public understanding of nature.
Euan, a significant focus of your work is centered around the impact of apex predators on species communities. So beyond their appeal to humans and probably also their pretty usefulness for as flagship species, why are predators crucial for conservation?
Yeah, we know from looking right around the world that species like crocodiles, sharks, bears, wolves, and in the case of Australia, dingoes are really important for the environment. They affect species in a whole range of ways. Probably the two most important ways is eating herbivores. So you think about wolves as an example, chasing and eating deer. That changes vegetation, the amount of vegetation that's available, and that affects other animals in the same system, things like birds and so forth. But also we're now learning as well that those big predators actually can scare and or kill other predators, smaller predators. So in the case of Australia, as an example, dingoes have been shown to kill feral cats and red foxes, which are really problematic for native wildlife. They've caused many extinctions in Australia. So these top predators are really, really important in the system, both killing other animals, which is a normal thing for a predator to do, but also actually to scare other animals, which changes the whole ecosystem.
So while lions and tigers may come to mind as first, like as apex predators, as the very iconic ones, it prompts the question, do all ecosystems have apex predators? And if so, do they fulfill similar roles in their ecosystems?
All ecosystems have predators, and I guess they vary in their size. As you just said, lions, of course, come to mind. But even when we think about it, invertebrate communities as well, if you're a praying mantis and you're something much smaller than that, you can see as a praying mantis as an apex predator as well. So it's really quite dependent on the ecosystem and the scale at which you're looking. But they are really important parts of systems, and they do affect a whole range of species. So yeah, we see predators pretty much wherever we look. They do have different effects on species depending on the predator you're looking at. So whether that's a really specialised predator, something like a great white shark, which might be targeting predominantly large mammals and large fish, but some other predators are more generalist in what they're taking. So things like dingoes actually have a really broad diet. They can eat everything from grasshoppers right through to quite large mammals, including kangaroos. So it really does change depending on the ecosystem that you're looking at.
So in Australia, where you do most of your research, well, Australia has a very bad record in species extinctions, probably even leading worldwide. Can you tell us why Australia's wildlife is so threatened or so endangered in this case?
There's a range of reasons why Australia's suffered so many extinctions, and you're right, we have more mammal extinctions in recent times than any other country in the world. So roughly 40 mammal extinctions, we think, since European colonisation. And probably the predominant reasons for why, unfortunately, so many species have been driven to extinction, one is habitat change and destruction. So Europeans came in, they did lots of land clearing that opened up habitats. At the same time, introduced species were put into the Australian landscape, so feral cats and red foxes, but also the European rabbit. The European rabbit grazes heavily on vegetation. It also increases the numbers of cats and foxes, and those cats and foxes have had a really devastating impact on native wildlife, particularly mammals, but also birds and reptiles as well. And a lot of our native animals haven't actually seen, those predators before, right? They haven't evolved with those predators, so they have actually poorly equipped ability to get away from those predators. So the impact of invasive predators has been a big one. Changing fire regimes as well, and that's been associated with the displacement of traditional burning practices by First Nations people. So unfortunately, because of colonisation and the horrible things that occurred when that happened, in some parts of Australia, those practices were ceased, basically. So that basically management of the country by First Nations peoples didn't continue as well. And of course, now we're seeing that being compounded by things like climate change. So I think really the point here in Australia is there's a whole range of threats that are occurring and impacting wildlife. And we now have more than 2,000 threatened species and ecological communities in Australia. And that list is being added to every year. So it is a pretty grim picture. On the plus side, I would say that we actually have some of the world's best ecologists and conservation biologists in the world, and we're generating lots of information and knowledge about how to better conserve species. So that's the good news.
Mm-hmm. So conservation, as you also mentioned, is traditionally centered probably on conserving specific ecosystems or targeting specific species. While with climate change kind of modifying ecosystems and changing our landscape drastically in the future, do you think we need to rethink conservation as a term or maybe even abandon it altogether?
I think we need to get used to the idea of taking risks in conservation. I think a lot of the things that we probably tried in the past aren't going to work for the fact that, yeah, as you say, we're living in this world of rapid environmental change, both in terms of the climate, but also just the amount of habitat modification that's occurring because of humans. And so, as an example, we're now talking about moving species around to new locations. So one area that may previously have been suitable for a species because of climate change may no longer. And then we actually have a decision to make. Do we move that animal to a new location so that it can survive in a more favourable climate or a more favourable habitat? And so that's called assisted migration, etc. Translocating species is really, really controversial, but also actually going back to predators, reintroducing predators to landscapes is also an idea. It's often referred to as rewilding, this idea of actually trying to restore ecosystems using the species themselves. We've lost large predators from large parts of the world because of human persecution, but we know that by bringing them back, in some cases, we can actually help to restore environment. So I think, in this, age where we have rapid biodiversity loss and huge numbers of extinctions, we need to be quite bold with conservation. Of course, careful. We can't just let things go and hope for the best, but we do need to be quite bold with our conservation actions.
Mm-hmm. So, and also along those lines, with all the environmental crises happen right now, climate change, invasive species, habitat fragmentation, and so on, what is your outlook for the future? What do you think will our landscape look like in 50, 100 years from now?
I wish I had Doctor Who's TARDIS machine so I could go back and as well as forward as well and travel through time to see what might happen. Unfortunately, I don't have that. Look, it's really hard sometimes to remain positive, of course, about what's happening to the world, given the rates of extinctions that we're seeing and the rapid change in the world as well. But we have to. There's the alternative basically is to give up, right? And so as an environmental scientist, an ecologist, a conservation person, I've got kids and I want to see them have a wonderful world that, the world that I love and connect with. So I think I am positive about what's possible. I guess we need to see more action from government and more support from governments to actually invest in conservation. It's obviously going to be a radically different world. I think, most people would probably accept that 1.5 degrees of increase in temperature is pretty much locked in at this point. We know that if we go past 2 degrees or more, then things become even more dire. We've already seen multiple bleaching events for the Great Barrier Reef. So we're seeing evidence already of these rapid changes that are occurring. So I think we have to unfortunately get used to the fact that the world we will see in a couple of decades will be very different to the world we grew up in. But that doesn't mean we can't make big changes now that hopefully will still conserve much of this wonderful biodiversity that we all enjoy.
Euan, your research all over Australia led undoubtedly to many unforgettable and memorable moments. Do you have a very specific moment you can share with us? Yeah,
look, that's a really tough question. I think one of the things I enjoyed the most was actually a trip that I did with my young family at the time where we travelled across northern Australia and across probably what's my favourite ecosystem, that's tropical savannas. And I revisited a lot of the PhD sites where I was working on a species called the Antilopine wallaroo. And our young children actually helped us do our research. So that would involve getting up early in the morning, doing kangaroo surveys, then doing vegetation surveys during the middle of the day in the hot sun. But we saw incredible landscapes, so beautiful vistas, in the tropical savannas, big escarpments, big, wide open spaces, and lots of incredible wildlife. Both my son and my daughter are really happy sort of chasing reptiles and looking at mammals at night time and so forth. So I think that's probably one of my most fond memories, is actually having our children involved in our research.
Yeah, it sounds indeed like a really nice memory. Thanks so much, Euan.
Thank you very much.